It looks like at last the 60 FPS update for Assassin's Creed Origins might be released very soon, and that the roadmap for Assassin's Creed Valhalla in May is also going to be fulfilled soon, as we now have an unofficial idea of when the next update for the game, called Update 1.5.2, is going to be dropped. Plus, more rewards are incoming in Valhalla tied to the River Raids mode, and there's some more news involving a couple of Assassin's Creed games being added to the Xbox Game Pass and the PlayStation Plus subscription services, and also another upcoming partnership involving Assassin's Creed, so no time to waste, let's just dive into the most recent Assassin's Creed news. And let's start with the various partnerships involving Assassin's Creed. You might have heard it already because it was announced a few weeks ago. Assassin's Creed Origins will be coming to Xbox Game Pass quote-unquote in the next 2 months, and the news was from mid-April, so it might happen in the next few weeks if I'm not mistaken. This marks another interesting spotlight on Origins after the Assassin's Creed social accounts mentioning the teams were considering a 60 FPS update for the game, and of course the fans asking for a crossover featuring Cassandra as a result of it. And now that update, the 60 FPS patch for Assassin's Creed Origins, might become a reality, as shared by the Twitter account PlayStation Game Size, who mentioned that update 1.6.0 for Assassin's Creed Origins has been added to the PlayStation database, and they even added the notes for the update that include a franchise menu, which is likely going to link to the other games of the franchise, and especially a higher frame rate when running on the PlayStation 5 console, meaning it's likely to be a higher frame rate also on the Xbox Series consoles. So yeah, the 60 FPS patch for Origins is inbound, and apparently it might come very soon, that is next week, potentially on a date comprised between May the 24th and May the 26th. Of course, these are just rumors for now, but PlayStation Game Size always got it right in the past, so fingers crossed for next week. On the PlayStation side of things, a few days ago, Ubisoft announced that their Ubisoft Plus subscription service will be coming to PlayStation, and before that, a set of Ubisoft games including Assassin's Creed Valhalla will be added to the new and revamped PlayStation Plus service, and more specifically to its extra and premium/deluxe subscriptions, and will be available on May the 24th, which is adding to the solid lineup of the new and improved subscription service that Sony is launching to try and contrast Microsoft's Game Pass. Finally, there's also another Assassin's Creed specific partnership coming up, and that's a partnership with Fall Guys that was teased very recently in an official livestream, which will see an Ezio Auditore outfit coming to the game, following up on what was done with Fortnite a few weeks ago as well, so if you're into that kind of game, be sure to check its updates in the coming days and weeks. Moving on to Valhalla, as you might remember, in the last few weeks, Ubisoft shared a roadmap for the content planned for half of April and the entirety of May. And while we already got update 1.5.1, which included part 2 of the Mastery Challenge game mode and the Ostara Festival, which ended on May the 12th, we are still left with a new update which is bound to add a new building in the settlement and possibly some more content tied to the River Raids game mode. So when is the update going to drop? Well, it hasn't been announced officially, but as it's been the case now for more than a year, the Twitter account PlayStation Game Size, which has always been able to check the PlayStation database and find in advance when updates are going to be added to the games, including Valhalla, has detected a new update coming up. Thus, they did mention that update 1.5.2 has been indeed added to the PlayStation database, which means there's a very high chance that the update is going to be released next week, and as it's usually the case, we should be able to get the patch notes on Monday, May the 23rd, or at the latest on the morning of Tuesday the 24th, with the update itself very likely being available again on Tuesday, May the 24th at 1 PM CET, 7 AM EST, 4 AM PST, etc., which is the timing used by Ubisoft with update 1.5.1 last month. So what is this new update going to be about? Well, to know that in detail, we're going to have to wait for the patch notes, of course. But before we get to the main feature of the update, we do already know that a new set of rewards for the River Raids game mode will be made available at some point in the coming days. One of the recent news articles on the Assassin's Creed website mentioned that these new rewards comprise an Outgear, which would be the first free Outgear available for players, then a bow, a scythe, and some new hair and beard cosmetics. Don't expect some new River Raids maps necessarily though, as the background of the picture seems to show some Francia environments akin to the Siege of Paris DLC locations, and especially to the Francia River Raids maps that were released in September last year, so as Joe Raptor mentioned in our 9th year anniversary podcast, it's more likely that these rewards are going to be just dropped in the River Raids store at some point, maybe with the next update or maybe even independently. So if you'd like to be able to get them instantly, it's probably best to grind some of those river raids ahead of time. The most relevant addition to the game through update 1.5.2 though will be the introduction of a new building in the settlement and consequently of a new feature to the game. The new building that is going to be located close to the river and as found out by Joe Raptor, also close to the River Raids building, will be called the Armory. And as the name might hint at, it's going to be a building where players will be able to store their armor and equipment and even display them in a way that slightly reminds of the Armory rooms hosting the equipment and weapons from the classic Assassin's Creed games, but that's not all. In fact, the building will be directly tied to the new loadout feature that the update will finally add to Valhalla. More specifically, players will be able to display up to 5 sets of weapons, armors, and even skills within the armory, and those 5 sets will be the 5 loadouts that they will be able to instantly shift to anywhere in the game world. So at last, the loadout feature will be added to Valhalla, and it will allow you to create your favorite builds and switch them on at the push of a button supposedly, but with a caveat. Judging from the description placed on the Assassin's Creed website, if you'd like to change one of these builds, one of these sets, you are going to have to go back to Ravensthorpe, to the Armory building, and get close to one of those mannequins in order to modify one of the 5 loadouts. So again, based on what the article reports, it looks like you won't be able to modify and save a new loadout from your inventory screen as it was the case with Assassin's Creed Odyssey. So yes, probably not the very best version of the feature, unless the actual feature turns out to be different of course, but even like that, you could consider it as a good compromise between the Odyssey version and, well, not having the feature at all. As Your Raptor mentioned in our podcast, this potential need to return to the settlement could be somehow expected, because a similar feature that is transmog that allows players to change the visuals of an item while still keeping its original stats, and thus, like the loadout system, acts directly on the shape and stats of your equipment, that feature also needs to be activated in the settlement and can't be just used from any place in the world, which personally pushed me not to use transmog that much. So you can get why it's not surprising that this new loadout system might be tied to the settlement too, and thus might cause you to go back to it every now and then. The transmog feature also has an in-game currency cost per modified item, which makes me wonder if we're also going to have to pay to change the loadouts in the Armory building. I hope that's not the case, but I guess that we'll know for sure on Tuesday. Of course, we're going to have to try and test the loadout feature to see how good it is, and you can bet we're going to stream it too, but already on paper this once again brings the comparison between the timing and the state of the post-launch content for Valhalla compared to that of Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and it also raises the question whether it's a little too late to have such useful features when a big chunk of the player base has already completed and left the game, making it so that potentially many of the remaining players who have already completed the game by now might just jump in, test the feature, and move on to other stuff because they don't have enough content or motivation to keep playing Valhalla. All those are topics that we extensively discussed in our 9th year anniversary podcast with Your Raptor and Andy Reload, that in case you missed, I very much suggest you check out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in our next video.